Culture is everywhere. It's the way that we walk, it's the way that we talk, it's the air that we breathe. It's really at the heart of our conception of and relationship to the world. And I think sometimes culture can be thought of as just the arts, but really we need to think about culture as something bigger and broader. Really, it's a tool and it's a weapon. My name is Domond. I'm a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm here with my two comrades and fellow cultural workers, Claudia De la Cruz and Jaylen Strong, to talk more about culture. What is it? How does it contribute to people's understanding of the world? What's its role in the fight for socialism, for a future that actually prioritizes people's needs and well-being? So let's get into it. I mean, culture can be pretty nebulous, right? Like what does that actually mean? And so I'm interested to hear y'all's thoughts on, what is culture? What's its role? How should we be defining it?
Well, I really like the definition of Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral says that culture is both the fruit of people's history and the determinant of people's history, which means that it's not only what we produce, but it's also what determines who we are. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about values, we're talking about beliefs, we're talking about how we perceive ourselves and how do we perceive the world. So our worldview is shaped by our culture and our understanding of culture. In many ways, we, like you said, framing this conversation, we think about it as arts, right? And we leave it in the realm of the art production. But everyone produces culture. Everyone that cooks is producing culture. Everyone that is engaged in using words to be able to express themselves is producing culture. So culture is a broad spectrum of things that actually allow us to understand the world and our place in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, I think, not to reiterate, because I love the Cabral quote, I think it's something I revisit a lot. For me, to add on to that, culture is also the conversation that we have together through all of that. So when people come together and forge conversation through different aspects of creation, through different aspects of production, through different aspects of this kinetic aspect of togetherness or interaction, I think that is sort of the site of culture. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about the Cabral quote, or we're talking about our aspects of building a culture together, I think of where we come together, the spaces that we come together, and how we mark them with our interactions. And that too sounds, I think, a little bit nebulous, but it allows us to say that it is broad spectrum. But when we're talking about culture in our context as organizers, as socialists, there's a different sort of space that we can arrive to pinpoint the sort of nebulous, broad spectrum ideas of culture to push it forward. So culture is art, culture is cooking, culture is conversing together in this way to create this amalgamation of who we are. It's a definitive aspect of our humanity, I think, in that way too. Right.
And I think it's also the values that we have as a people and a society too. I think that's a big part of culture. I mean, we'd be remiss to think that, we're not impacted by that because we're swimming in culture, and the way, especially being in the United States, the way that we're taught to think about things, like even the way that we're taught, or like what we're taught about, what kinds of ideals are held up, and the way that our history is taught to us. I mean, right now under the Trump administration, we're seeing a cultural war really play out in front of our eyes. Mm-hmm. There's the war on DEI and the fact that we're being told that we can't learn about our history as a country. That's a cultural war. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's many other things, of course. It's a racist war. It's playing into just these American values that, Trump and his right-wing folks are really trying to perpetuate and underscore as like what it means to be an American. I want to talk about Bad Bunny. I want to talk about this Superbowl question because I think it really brought to the forefront this cultural war that's kind of at play. I mean, you have Bad Bunny, who's one of the most high performing artists in the world, who's Puerto Rican, which We know Puerto Rico is unfortunately part of the U.S. because it's a colony of the United States. And as soon as he was chosen for the headliner of the Super Bowl, it's like, what is this? Like, this is not American. Like, what are we doing? Like, our country's falling into disarray because we have someone who's speaking Spanish perform in a cultural way. And I think it's just kind of crazy. But I think it's opened up this conversation of the way that Trump and the far right and just, some of these figures are trying to manipulate like what it is to be upholding American culture. And so I'm just interested in y'all's thoughts on that.
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really funny. It's really funny. I think that when we think about what the Super Bowl is, right? We're talking about one of the most watched events on television across the world, not even just in the U.S. This is the site for millions, if not billions of people to watch a football game, but more often than not, because of this, capitalist culture of commodification, they pay millions of dollars for this primetime performer. Obviously, Bad Bunny is one of the most profound and large musicians globally, right? So this global call is what really, I think, attracted the NFL or the shareholders and the stakeholders for this, commodification, this kind of cultural commodification, to reach out and say, we need to do Bad Bunny because it would make millions, if not billions of dollars.
Right.
That's the idea. The idea to me is like Bad Bunny would generate profit.
Right.
And the outrage is coming from the same ideological camp in a way. Right. The capitalists and the billionaires are upset, or rather are not upset by this profit margin. But the people who they are ideologically invested in, so the far right, are at a base are who are actually upset. So the base is upset and disconnected from the sort of, the ruling class, the billionaire class that is funding the NFL, that is inviting Bad Bunny, knowing that it would make a lot of money, but knowing that it quite possibly would upset, far right influencers and people online who are, in this sort of understanding, in this cultural understanding, and this political and ideological understanding that, we don't want anybody speaking Spanish, or the immigration problem in our country is out of hand. So these far right talking points are like existing in the same point. So when I'm thinking about the Super Bowl, I think of that first, because I think that the culture of commodification is at head with the culture of the far right, and this culture of white supremacy. There's no other way to put it, right? So the same kind of pot of commodification with this like strange, position of far right ideology are happening at the same time. So the Super Bowl is actually a really, really incredible site for analysis and like for us to dissect, because it's like it shows the major issue of how the capitalists or the billionaires are willing to exploit people of different cultures, are willing to exploit performers and cultural workers, are willing to exploit the people, whether they are Bad Bunny or whether they're an everyday person in society, for the sake of accumulating more wealth for themselves. Right. So it's really, really actually one of the most interesting sites of cultural discussion right now. It's a lot of people are talking about it. Football season is back, and I feel like I've never even heard the Super Bowl performer being announced this early. It's what, November, and the Super Bowl is in February. So there's also this sort of strange new aspect to it of like they're putting this out early to test the waters in this political climate. So I'm also really interested about that also.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, it might be an unpopular opinion, but I love Bad Bunny.
Yeah.
Unpopular opinion?
I don't know. For some people, you know what I'm saying? There are ultra leftists that will be coming at me because of it. But I love Bad Bunny because I think that, in terms of his artistry, he has had the capacity to be unapologetically Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Not even like Caribbean, not even like Latin American, not unapologetically Caribbean is, a lot of us have that. But he's unapologetically Puerto Rican and against the colonization of his country.
Mm-hmm.
That does not take away from the fact that he too is in an industry that is a capitalist industry and understands how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
Masterfully understands how to navigate it. And I think it's important to say that. He hasn't compromised. He has to make compromises to become the mega superstar that he is. Adidas, Amazon. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, he has not compromised his message of pro-independence for Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that we should applaud, because he could have. Many have done it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I think that's the first thing that I have to say.
Yeah, totally.
Secondly, I think that it's true. Bad Bunny is profitable. And that is undeniable.
100%. Yeah.
And so the folks that are advocating for him to be in that halftime show know this. And what we are seeing, a little bit like Jaylen was explaining, is the perfect imagery of an intra-class war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? A war against, between different sections of the ruling class, really. Those who are leading a war that is a cultural war that has economic and political impacts. The Trumpites, right? Like the ultra right-wing white supremacists, and those who still understand that the very foundation of capitalism is profit.
Yeah.
And they're willing to kind of scale down, at least in a visible way, their white supremacist ideology to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right? Like they could scale it down a little bit and hide it, and it's fine. Because ultimately they understand that exploiting this culture, exploiting this expression, which is something that, they do very well, will make them money.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you look at the other side, which is the ultra right wing and, white supremacist, overtly white supremacist folks, they are there to remind that other part of the ruling class that this is also a foundational piece to the capitalist system that they've created.
Yeah.
That is not simply making profits, but is also upholding a white supremacist worldview, a colonizing worldview, a worldview of making others less of human beings. And so they're launching this this cultural warfare, like you very well described it at the beginning, like to be able to remind people that the so-called American culture has to be all white.
Yeah.
Has to be, has to speak a certain way, has to uplift certain values, has to uplift certain norms. It has to uplift a certain ideology that is not the one that Bot Bunny is going to put forth when he gets on that stage. On the contrary, it's going to be everything in opposition to that.
Yeah.
And so I think, one, we shouldn't get lost in the sauce in trying to make Bad Bunny more revolutionary than he is.
Right.
We need to acknowledge the fact that, he exists and actually is thriving in a capitalist industry for a reason. So he's making negotiations with companies that exploit Puerto Rican people, because they're Amazon, Adidas, all of that. But at the same time, he is utilizing his platform in a way that it hasn't been utilized in a long time by such a huge star to uplift the reality of Puerto Rico, the struggles in Puerto Rico, the culture of Puerto Rico in a way that no one else has done in a long time. I think secondly, we need to understand this as a perfect picture of what intra-class warfare looks like. And obviously, there are casualties, people that are caught in the middle, which is the working class. And so you see these dynamics and these debates on social media, on, folks trying to defend Bad Bunny, saying things like, but he's American. But yeah, why is he American though? Because Puerto Rico is colonized by the United States. We forget that unfortunately, Puerto Rico has been utilized for military exercises to attack other places in the region. We forget the struggles that to get the U.S. Navy out of Vieques, for example, like that came from the Puerto Rican people. And so, yeah, he is American. He's American because he was born in the American continent in a territory that has been colonized by the United States. So that is not really that's not something to brag about either, right? I think we need to understand the position of the United States in relationship to the rest of the world and the shaping of culture in the rest of the world, right? Like how it utilizes cultures like hip hop, for example, that are very much that is Black culture. Whether it is the mixture of Black Caribbeans with Black people from this country, and then it robs it of its soul, remakes it and sells it to the world and profits from it. That's what it has done. That's what the art and culture industry in this country has done to our culture. And so it's not doing anything less with providing a platform for Bad Bunny in the most viewed show in the planet. Year.
Yeah.
It's a culture when it's convenient.
Yeah.
For them in power.
If it's profitable, we'll do it. That's the capitalist idea.
The motive, yeah. I don't know if y'all heard actually the counter Super Bowl show that they were trying to do.
That failed.
It failed. Like basically they're coming out and being like, yeah, I don't know if we can make this happen. Like, we don't know if we have the numbers. And I think it's just interesting because we would assume, right, that they would choose like Kid Rock, with his right wing ass, or like some country singer, some white country singer to be the headliner. And I think like when you think about it, these people in power are trying to make us think that American culture, quote unquote, is a certain type of way. But the fact of the matter is they couldn't get enough people to kind of get on board with what it is they're saying is the American culture, right? Like if so many people really were like, nah, Bad Bunny isn't for us, they would have been writing for this alternative show, right? Like I think they're forgetting the fact that their little understanding of hyper like white supremacist American culture is for a small subset of them, right? Like it's not just people of color who are listening to Bad Bunny and making him one of the most top rated artists in the world. It's people of all backgrounds, right? Like it's Trump was trying to sit up there and say, who is Bad Bunny? I never even heard of them. Okay. Do you know your kids are probably listening to Bad Bunny?
But it's also on brand because he doesn't know where anything else is.
That's true. He's not a good marker.
He's not a good marker. Like this man is completely disconnected from the real world. He did not. He said something about groceries at some point that he was like, who uses the word groceries? You know what I'm saying? Like,
what's the other word that we're using?
I mean, he doesn't shop. He doesn't buy groceries. So how would he know?
He's never bought a grocery in his life like this.
Like he's probably had many of people buying groceries for him. He has no clue what that is, and so he is not a great marketer.
No, he's not.
Yeah. I mean, not only is he not a great marker, but it also shows like just the literal tomfoolery that happens out of this administration, out of the White House, around the things that people actually are talking about. I mean, the reason that you brought this up is because this is a valuable like conversation not only to us but to other people, like
right.
And I think that's a big part of it too. Like when we're talking about culture, it's also popularity, right? So the popular conversation to be having is, this big one about Bad Bunny. The popular conversation is, the response to it is the show that's happening, and this is what culture really boils down to. Is like what is most popular that connects us and socializes us together. And then, it makes me think, obviously, probably, what it means to actually build this people's culture, this aspect of like what culture defines all of us. Is it diverse? Is it multifaceted? Is it not one singular monolithic culture? Absolutely. But a people's culture is about Bad Bunny, is about this conversation that is leveraged through his identity, through his class background, through the language that he speaks and sings and writes and raps in, and why that being performed at a place like the Super Bowl is crucial. Because as much as the white supremacist far-right ideology wants to veer away from the archetype of Bad Bunny, or even if we think about, last year, Kendrick Lamar, right? And this sort of, black performer.
And Beyonce before, too, right? And they was all mad.
With all of their flaws, with all of the things that they...
all the contradictions, because they're...
The entire contradictions. People listen to these artists, they listen to these songs because it resonates with them, and it generates this, popularity. And I'm wondering, I guess, alongside both of us, like, what is it that actually creates this identification of culture with its contradictions without... why is it important for us to, even be talking about this? I feel like I'm stealing your role a little bit by jumping into the conversation.
You're good.
You asked us the first question, so now I'm just kind of wondering.
I have, to the question you asked, and a little bit about what you're saying now. So the question you asked in terms of like, the white right wing failing to do their counter show, right? I think it's also an expression of where we are ideologically and where people are in terms of culture as well. Like, culture is not finite. Right?
No.
If it is the fruit and the determinant of people's history, it means that it's ongoing. That is something that we are creating constantly. And it doesn't necessarily stop at the culture that was once known to be primarily white supremacist, primarily patriarchal, primarily, anti-LGBTQ. Like, it has moved far from that at this moment. And even if some of these folks from the right wing would have an idea that is white supremacist that they share with those folks putting on that cultural event, they might not want to out themselves in that way because the majority of people in this country are not back there anymore.
Yeah.
And so outing themselves by creating this counter festival or this counter show is kind of putting a scarlet letter on their forehead and saying that they're against the will of the people. That also affects them in their profits, right? And so they don't want to go against the will of the people. They might say what they say in different moments. They might go out there and feel strong enough, like Kid Rock, and support Trump, right? But we also know what we know, and we know that he wasn't never part of, he was never really on the right side of history, which is with the people. And so I think, that's important to know, that culture is not finite, that we're still producing culture, that culture has evolved from what it once was to what it is now, where people are actually, the English speakers are trying to learn Spanish to understand what it is that makes Bad Bunny and why people like him so much. People are, jamming and dancing to his songs without understanding what it is. Like, we're just in a different world where people have different musical taste because they've experienced different musical taste. Like, the world is more international in a sense. Like, people have access to learn more about different things, and that shifts culture as well. Social media has been huge in that sense,
right?
TikTok, all of that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to note that. I think to the question that Jaylen is asking, being able to understand culture as an instrument to organize is important. And so we understand that there is Gramsci would have talked about the common sense and the good sense. There's a common sense that is formed by the culture in which we are, and we're able to understand and see that there's elements of that culture that are not good, right? Obviously. But there are elements that also we could hold and create a threat that takes us to the good sense, that then takes us to the socialist sense, right? Yeah. And we keep moving forward and forward. But we cannot throw out what is it that my good friends say? The baby with the bathwater. You know what I'm saying? You got to be able to learn and listen to to different culture productions and kind of take from those culture productions what is critically important to be able to build the good sense that is so necessary. A lot of people talk and say a lot about Cardi B. I don't just love Cardi B because she's from the Bronx.
Okay, all right.
I was gonna.
Now they got her on the MTA yelling at people.
I mean, Cardi, you know what I'm saying? She got a huge extra point for being from the Bronx.
Right.
Still existing in a capitalist culture,
Mm-hmm.
in a capitalist industry,
Mm-hmm.
will do things to be able to make profit because that's the idea that is behind this culture, but has enough sense to speak out in support of federal workers. When the first shutdown during the Trump administration happened, she was out there,
Mm-hmm.
you know. She's out there talking about how high the rent is.
Mm-hmm.
I did see
in the
that.
Bronx, you know. So like, I think it's important to, if you're listening to Cardi B and you're not a socialist, that's a good entry point.
Mm-hmm.
Comrade Cardi.
Let's talk about how Comrade Cardi
Right.
is talking about affordability.
Okay.
Because even in her position, as someone who came from the Bronx and came from a poor community and still goes back to that community, she can acknowledge these things. That's something to bring up in a conversation. So I think culture and understanding culture and being in relationship to culture that is being produced by the capitalist system is important. Living in a bubble doesn't allow us to organize.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
need to be aware of where people's mindsets are and what is moving them in order to be able to organize that.
Yeah, I mean it's real world, right? When you have a pulse on sort of the cultural conversations, when you have a pulse on musicians or artists who like Cardi B or like Bad Bunny can talk about issues to dealing with the people that they even know. Like I remember seeing those videos of Cardi B during the pandemic when she was talking about having to get groceries for her parents and for people in her neighborhood or something like that. And I think that it's really important for us to be able to know that, you know, the people who all of us listen to, all of us hear, more often than not, we find them relatable for reasons like that because they can speak to our issues. And then there's, you know, this fabrication of the same type of thing when we're talking about Kid Rock or what have you, where there's a fabrication of the narrative that there are artists who can speak to the frustrations of the far right. There are people who align themselves with the Trump administration or with this political ideology and speak to a base of people who feel isolated. So I think that that's a big part of the political and cultural organizing is that when we can't like admonish or put away Bad Bunny or Cardi B or Kendrick Lamar or Beyonce or anyone who you might name because people pay attention to it and people deeply care about what the artists who create these songs or what have you say to them. And I think that's pretty crucial to the entryway. Like you said, there's an entryway that we are able to speak about cultural elements or cultural development to make it even more expansive, right? Culture isn't finite in what's possible, and it's also it's not finite in how it expands across the globe, like you said. So for me, I'm really I take that really crucially because I have friends and people in my family who will ask me about like, did you hear what this person say? Did you hear what this person say? Or did you hear this new song from anybody from like G Herbo or like, I don't know, Lil Wayne or anything like that. And it's important, right? Because this is what we have. Presently, this is what we have. And I think that there's a lot that can be wrong about it. There's a lot that promotes violence or misogyny or sexism or can be anti-LGBTQ, right? There's a lot of different aspects of what pops up in popular culture, popular Black culture and music, right? And it's important for us to have the pulse to be able to say, yeah, I might like the groove of that song, but why was this being said? And what can we say about when we internalize what's being said, right? And that's a part of formulating and moving along with the culture. Some of us even may have access to the people making the culture, right? And it's important for us to have that kind of intervention to shape the framework at what we're hearing and listening and speaking and talking about. I think that also is important because not only is it not finite, it's also malleable.
Yeah.
Culture is malleable to the hands of masses of people, malleable to the hands of the person who's creating it. Anybody can be the cultural creator, but do they have the responsibility to take care of people through the work that they make? Do they have the responsibility to tend to the people around them? And what are they charging people forward with? Is it a call to action? Is it sadness or loneliness or any kind of description of their mood or their disposition? Is it jubilance and joy about like living and having life, or struggling and coming out of struggle? So I think it's also about like how we shape and mold culture forward, you know?
And I think it's about not leaving people in the entry point, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the same way that we are able to say, yeah, Bad Bunny, cool, we like Bad Bunny, but like, what's the alternative to? Right? What's the alternative to, like, something that I really appreciate about like just, you know, music and songwriters is that there's so many of them.
Yeah. Like a lot.
There's like, you know, and if you live in New York City, which is where we are now, mm-hmm. like, there's so many different alternative artists, mm-hmm. revolutionary artists, movement artists. So it's like, in every genre, like you could identify at least 1, 2, 3, or many more good artists that are making good music that could literally be put forth as alternatives to musicians and artists that are mainstream artists. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the same way that we listen, because we need to have the capacity to listen in order to introduce new information, we need to be able to keep our ears and eyes open for the music and the art that is being created as alternative, you know, to the capitalist system, mm-hmm. and uplift, you know, the ways in which people could fine-tune their taste buds, mm-hmm. To hear different words, yeah. with different content that actually edifies their intellect, but also nourishes their soul. And there's a lot of that that is being created that doesn't get the platforms, that, you know, doesn't get the views, but is out there. And so I think as people who are creating culture, or people that are invested in promoting culture, we mm-hmm. need to have that capacity as well, because ultimately we're trying to build a culture that is different from the capitalist one.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, y'all got me thinking. I got a lot of thoughts over here right now. I want to talk about the use of culture by the far right a little bit more in this country. And, you know, one thing I want to start with is, you know, this might be a hot take, but I think it's important to acknowledge that Trump's base, like the people who voted for Trump, we know Trump has got a whole lot of debauchery going on, and, you know, the viewpoint that he's pushing forward, what he's trying to do to our country and all of that jazz. But it's important to acknowledge that his voter base, his views aren't necessarily represented in his base of voters, right? Like, I think we can acknowledge that people voted for him for a lot of different reasons. It doesn't necessarily translate to some idea that this country and its cultural basis is moving more to the right, or that people are just like more racist or more sexist or whatever, as we can kind of characterize Trump's administration. I think that's an important point, just to start with. But I think like we can see how Trump, and I mean, if you go on Twitter and you see like the Department of Homeland Security, the ICE page, like all the, like literally even the White House page, they're using culture as a weapon, as a tool. I mean, they have little Join ICE ads that are playing on these, like this imagery of protecting our country. Some like putting forward like it's like the American ideal, we're defending freedom or whatever. And they're exploiting this like historic imagery to put forward their political goals and whatnot in this country, and really trying to use that to shift people's mindset, because we know the majority of people don't think that way. That's not the basis of this country. And I think this goes, I kind of want to take us into like history too, talk a little bit why they're doing what they're doing, why it's so important that we recognize that culture has always been a weapon. And, you know, actually, I'm reading this book. The cultural.
You had it a little too.
The
handy.
cultural Cold War. Actually, you know what? I kind of want to read a little section from it.
It's a really good book.
So essentially, this book is about how the CIA in the Cold War waged a literal war using culture. So, I mean, just to give some context for the viewers, I'm sure y'all know, but, you know, in the Cold War, a war that was really against socialist ideals, essentially, the CIA and a bunch of other institutions were waging a covert operation to basically like use culture as an additional tool in their military and economic war against the spread of socialism and communism. And so I want to read this little passage. Our aim in the Cold War is not conquering of territory or subjugation by force, President Eisenhower explained at a press conference. Our aim is more subtle, more pervasive, more complete. We are trying to get the world by peaceful means to believe the truth. That truth is that Americans want a world at peace, a world in which all people shall have opportunity for maximum individual development. The means we shall employ to spread this truth are often called psychological. Don't be afraid of that term just because it's a $5 5-syllable word. Psychological warfare is the struggle for the minds and wills of men. President Eisenhower straight up acknowledged that they are fighting in the battle of ideas, right? They are fighting for people's minds. And I think in this book, it really goes into the fact that the US government on all different fronts was tricking people. I mean, they co-opted intellectuals, artists, institutions, magazines, many of which didn't know that they were being co-opted in the first place, in the name of defending American freedom, is kind of how they were framing it. They were going after people who maybe weren't socialists, but were progressive. And they were saying, nah, y'all don't want the Soviet model. You want to defend freedom. And so they were going into people's minds, essentially. I mean, it is literally psychological warfare to make people think like, oh, I'm doing this. And actually, it's just about forwarding the U.S.'s foreign policy goals. And to bring it full circle, I mean, you know, some people are going to say that American culture is just about apple pie and racism, right? But I think the fact that the U.S. government has historically and continues to fight such a hard war on the cultural front speaks to actually the revolutionary roots in this culture. I mean, in this country, you know, the way that culture has developed in this country and the way that people have used struggle to forward it and to develop it, that's actually at the root. That's our class. That's our history, a movement, you know, for values. I mean, I would say quote unquote American values that are actually around real justice, real democracy, and real freedom, not these like little piecemeal fake ideas that they're trying to feed to us.
I mean, I think that rooting ourselves into understanding that there's always been two Americas is important. Yeah. That there was the America that was built on the backs of stolen people on stolen land. The America that pushes the narrative that white is right and everything that is not white is wrong. The America that says that there's a place for women and is not in, you know, the advancement of our struggles as women. There is the America that tells us that Christianity is the only religion, but there's only one type of Christianity that you're allowed to practice, which is also oppressive. That is an America. But then there's also the America of the abolitionist movement. Right. There's also the America of the indigenous movement and the right of indigenous lands and people for sovereignty. There's also the America of the, you know, Black Reconstruction period. Mm-hmm. There is the America of the Civil Rights Movement. There is the America of the suffrage movement. There is the America of the Black Liberation Movement. Okay. Right? there is that America. There's an America that's anti-imperialist,
Yes.
right? That was able to build a movement in the late 1800s that was called the Anti-Imperialist League.
Okay, talk about it, Claudia.
And the Anti-Imperialist League was led by no other than beloved literature, king Mark Twain.
Okay.
Like, everyone likes to raise names like Mark Twain and forget the fact that he was an anti-imperialist who was standing against the taking over of Puerto Rico, of Guam. So it's like, this is the America that those who hold economic and political power want us to forget.
Yeah.
And they've held the concept of being an American hostage. And it's unfortunate because to the rest of the world, the global South specifically, when they talk about America, is U.S. imperialism. And in that, there's also the erasure of the resistance movements that have been developed in this country. And I'll clarify a little bit, like, it is up to us who reclaim that history to give another image to the United States of America. Which means that there's a legacy, there's a tradition, there's a history that we have to fight very hard to reclaim, specifically in this context, in which you have in political power and obviously the economic power of the capitalist and imperialist that tell us that we can't learn about enslavement in this country, that we can't learn about movements that fought for our civil rights, that we don't have the right to be anti-fascist, that we don't have the right to be anti-imperialist. This is the moment where we look back at the history and say, but wait a minute, this too is American. This is not alien. What's foreign is APAC.
Okay.
That's foreign.
Right.
But yet that's accepted, and it's highly connected to the American culture of the powerful, and it's highly connected to what we are told Christianity is, right? Because Christianity is also a huge thing. Like, I don't understand how they have the audacity to say that Christianhood is the most, attacked religion in this, which is also part of culture, right? Because it's like they create this threat internally, and the threat is anyone and anything that goes against these values that are backwards, that are wrong, that are immoral.
That most people don't even rock with.
Yeah, that people don't believe. In their core, they don't believe it. And so it's an attempt to take a hold of a history of a culture and make it finite.
Make it and redefine it.
Yeah, and make it like, this is what it is. And actually, it hasn't been that for a long time. And trying to bring us back to the 1700s, to the 1800s, is not going to rock.
Right. No. And that makes me want to add to this, like, moving and, like, critical definition of culture that we have. It makes me want to add just simply, like, culture is an act of resistance. Of
course.
Culture is, I mean, I can say it again 3 times. Culture is an act of resistance. It is an act of resistance. It is an act of resistance. Okay. And that's part of the definition.
Period.
But
point blank period.
I think that right. I think to add to it too is that to say, like, to add to the broad spectrum culture, but to put it into the American context, is that culture is also, in the American context, socialist.
Yeah.
It is anti-imperialist. It is the resistance of enslaved Africans. It is the resistance of indigenous people. It is the resistance from then to now and onwards into the future. And as you were speaking, when you said imaging or portraying, I just kept thinking, like, when you go into, I don't know, I had an image of, like, going into, like, a church or into a museum, and sometimes when you go into, like, an like a archaeological site or something, there'll be a painting, and behind that painting there'll be something else behind it. I was watching some movie, I can't remember what it was, but this was really the crux. Like, they started restoring a painting and they found a painting underneath it. And I started to think about what is happening right now in our context in the US, and it feels a lot like the painting that the far right or the political establishment, the imperialists, the billionaires are putting and setting into stone is slowly chipping away, and people can see the portrait behind it. There's an illumination from the past that's coming forth when we're talking about Mark Twain, or when we're talking about Assata Shakur or Malcolm X, or anybody who has been a beacon of cultural and political revolution, right? In their time and forward. This is the culture that has to be more pervasive to people and has to illuminate and break through this mold putting forth by those in power, the ruling class, to overshadow like this true culture. And I keep thinking about this lately of like what we have to do to scrape off these edges and to make avail this beautiful portrait of our history. Because as soon as you investigate someone who you love, someone who's a cultural producer, someone like Assata or Malcolm X or Claudia Jones or any of the books that we have on the table, or Cabral, or anyone in the anti-imperialist and socialist movement across the world, you'll start to see this grand web of producers who fought and struggled and were revolutionaries. Which is to say, like, this is the revolutionary culture that wanted a better world, that wanted a world that actually had space for different cultural ideas to be in conversation, to be broad, and to interact with one another. And I think that really is just something I was thinking about as you were speaking, to ground us in what we can do in the future, is that it actually is our job to mop away this false portrait and vision for our world that doesn't fit anybody but a small minority, a small few. So for me, and as an artist myself, as a cultural worker, for me, I constantly want to be destroying that false portrait, revealing the old one while creating a new one. Right. While saying, I actually want to study what was done before me and put it in the future. I want to build this culture that is vibrant, that is hungry for more, that is not complacent, that refuses complicity and wants to build the world anew and forward. So I just really was thinking about that a lot, you know?
I think one of the most threatening aspects of the culture of resistance is that it is inherently creative.
Right.
Like, it has to be creative. It has had to fight so many times throughout history that it does not allow itself the mediocrity that the right wing has when it creates some shit. Like, it's mediocre. It's coming out of the same playbook. Like, if you look back to, you're talking about the cultural Cold War, and the interventions, the cultural interventions that they had, because they co-opted a lot of musicians, they co-opted a lot of artists, and they also built institutions. Right. They also created mediums to be able to put forth their propaganda. And if you look at the imagery that they utilized back then, is not very different from the imagery that they're utilizing now. They lack creativity because ultimately it's not their. I mean, it's there to impose themselves on the hearts and minds of people. I think the threatening aspect of a culture of resistance is that it actually wins people over. And when it does win people over, there's no going back. Right. There's no going back. Like, it's a progressive thing. What they build is regressive. It creates stagnation for you as a human being. And so I think in many ways, when you talk about, this culture of resistance and its potential, they need to create, even if it's tapping back into the past, things that they need to do it, because ultimately there's power in the culture of resistance. Like, the last 2 years, people mobilizing and organizing against the just cruel and horrendous genocide on the Palestinian people revealed so much. There's no turning back for an entire generation of people that were politicized and whose conscience was deepened so rapidly in 2 years. And it's not only ideological, it's also cultural. Like the keffiyeh took a different meaning.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
people walking around just wearing that like it's nothing now.
The watermelon took a different meaning.
Yeah.
The you know, the dancing, the songs from Palestine. Like people
we're singing chants in Arabic. I'm like, okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
okay.
Like people are out here connecting based on a sentiment and a fight for dignity.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no going back from that. And they have to fight that. And because they're not creative, because they are mediocre, they cannot produce anything that is new, because what they're trying to put forth is an ideology that is dead.
Yeah.
Period.
In the grave.
I mean, been dead. I mean, the point that we're trying to make here, right, is that culture is a central site of class struggle.
Yeah.
The far right knows that, but do we know that?
Yeah.
Do we know that we are in a war, a cultural war, a battle of ideas that, you know, the people in power are inundating us with every single day? I mean, you think that you're like, oh, I'm living outside of it or whatever. And it's like all those little influencers that you follow on TikTok, we're all drinking the same Kool-Aid. And so I really like this point that you made, Jaylen, about we're not trying to preserve I'm not over here being patriotic necessarily for being an American. You know, that's not what we're here to do. And we're not trying to we're not trying to we're trying to build something new, right? We need to think about, you know, when we're trying to reinvent a culture that centers on a world that people's dignity and well-being is prioritized. We need to center building a culture in which, you know, people get along, you know, like we're not looking at our neighbors like they're crazy. You know, we can walk down the street and it's cool to say what's up to people or like to help people. Like that's the culture that they're trying to strip us of. We're social beings as humans, right? And that's what capitalism has been so successful at doing, is trying to detach us from that reality of who we are. And we have to know that our ancestors, that, you know, the people in the future too, us in the future, will be people that can triumph over that. And I think, you know, we need to understand the role that culture plays in us fighting this good fight for a new world. We can't act like it's on the back burner.
And culture is not apolitical.
No.
Right? Like that's another thing. Like culture is not apolitical, and the development of culture also comes with the development of ideology. And the continuation again of a legacy and a people's history. And I think it's important for us to uplift that and raise that in every space that we're in. Ultimately, you know, people who were enslaved and the slave masters at some point attempted to normalize that relationship, and that was broken. And then there was a moment where that was no longer normal, and in fact it was inhumane. And it was considered exploitation. And then
like, oh, you got slaves, like,
and then you move forward and it's like, okay, no one ever considered women wearing pants. And now, hello. You know what I'm saying? Or holding a job, or doing, you know, or actually doing many things. And so I think understanding that we have inherently, because we are working class people, a culture that moves us to overcome is so important. It's so important. That our culture has allowed us to overcome many and many and many times over and over and over again, and we could do it again. That this is a moment in history. This is not history. This is a moment in history, and that there's so much more to create. I think it's important for us to have that understanding, because that those who hold political and economic power to shape a narrative will tell us that we don't have that power. But this moment this moment that we're experiencing with the Trump administration has been an accumulation of things. On the other side, us experiencing a space where, again, we could speak about Palestine and it has a different connotation for people and it has a different meaning for people, that we could speak about Congo, that we could speak about Sudan, that we could speak about Haiti, that we could speak about Puerto Rico, that we could speak about solidarity with Cuba and Venezuela.
Talk about it.
It has an accumulative also factor to it, because people have been fighting for this moment for a long time too. And so it's class war, because that's what it is. But we as working class people need to assume the responsibility of continuing to build a culture that is a people's culture that moves towards another project, which is the socialist project.
Right. And only what I would add to that is that is the goal, and Black working and oppressed people are the purveyors of that project, are the purveyors of building this culture for the future and for the moment now, and fighting back also. Not only, and I feel like I'll just keep adding to it, not only is culture an act of resistance, but culture is also waging the struggle, waging the fight of creating the tools, whether artistically or creatively or ideologically or just in one's mind, creating the belief and the tools and the optimism to say this is this moment. And what do we do to carve out the future away from it? What do we build as far as institutions, as far as organizations, as far as our spirits? What do we build to make sure that we do not revert back to this moment again, or the one that they're trying to take us back to? Right. So in this struggle and in this fight, we are the purveyors, but we also have to be acutely aware that no one else is going to do it. That we are, again, at the front line of building a cultural landscape that is not shy to say that this is about class, that this is about building forward a working class unity, a culture of unity, right? Because without that, we're nothing. Together, we are nothing.
Right.
Or rather, together, when we do not fight, we are nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that alone we are nothing, I should say. I want to fix that. Alone we are nothing, and together we are stronger. And in that way, we push forward to realizing this destiny that has to be achieved. And what is that but the process of building this emergent and diverse and non-finite culture? You know, it is the conversation to be having forever, even if we do reach a point that feels like stasis or peace or prosperity. What do we keep doing to maintain this? What is our fight to defend it also?
I just wanted to add, I think it's also very much important to the question of like, well, the capitalists have kind of figured out the recipe, right? So like, I think I would say that more than figuring out the recipe, they hold the political and economic power to shift narratives as they please and utilize, half-truths. Tap into people's already preformed notions of the world, preformed by the church, preformed by the education system, preformed by the communities that we're a lot of the times forced to live in. And so they tap into those realities and put forth half-truths and utilize those to manipulate us. Right? So it's like, it's a manipulation game, really, what the capitalist system does with working class people, to the extent that you have working class people fighting and defending capitalist interests. Like, you don't have $1 to your name. You're out here saying, I love Elon Musk.
Right.
Or I love Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk actually have the wealth that they have because they've worked for it.
Okay.
But you don't have $1 to your name, and most likely you also kind of worked in maybe Amazon, and know that you are the ones, your labor is the one that has made this person a billionaire that exploits people like you, but you defend them, right? So it's like the consciousness of our people has been brutally exploited by the capitalists, and we need to have that understanding as people in the left as socialists, as revolutionaries. We need to understand that there's been a cruel imposition of ideology on our people, and we need to have compassion with our people when we engage them. And what that means is trying to understand where and how people got to that conclusion.
Yeah.
What led them or leads them to believe that? And again, as we are able to listen to people, we are able to then build trust and inform, provide new information, build bridges that allow us to be in conversation with our people. And in many ways, I feel like sometimes left spaces, progressive spaces, and I'm using those terms kind of like broadly, because there is a broad sentiment now on who's the left and but that's another round table. Sometimes there's a lot of judgment as to why people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
There's a lack of compassion. There is a lack of welcoming to regular working class people who don't think like us or are not in the same space politically, not too far off, but maybe they feel it, but they don't have the language. We haven't created space to be in relationship and communicate with those folks. Whereas capitalism does a really good job at saying, come as you are. Because ultimately, wherever you are, we will transform you by very brutal imposition to support us.
Right.
A co-optation of aspiration.
A lot of it is like the feel good phenomenon, right? Like you go into a place and that physical space where we build culture makes you feel good.
Right.
And you feel so good. And you have the singing and you have the hugging and you feel so good. And then you leave that space and you have no real clue of what was that.
Right.
Just that you felt good. And so it becomes kind of like this emotional addiction. We're just keep looking for that feel good without actually transforming the conditions that make you feel bad in the first place.
Right.
And so that's what capitalism does. You sit in front of the TV long enough, you want to buy McDonald's. You want to go buy yourself the latest kicks. You want to go get yourself, because all these things, the consumption of these commodities, you're told that when you have that, you're not poor. When you have that, you're valuable. And so we need to, again, understand that, and from that space, in a very humane way, move people from there and have an alternative of those feel-good spaces to spaces that feel good but also inform you and edify you and strengthen you and build your confidence to fight at the everyday struggle.
Right.
Yeah, clearly, what we're getting at is it's not enough to just be a bystander in this moment, not even to be cliche, but we all have a role in being able to build the new world that we want to see. We can't just simply resist. We have to be thinking about how we're building something new.
That's right.
And, if we're trying to bring our people along with us, right? We're not trying to go create something on the side that has no attachment to where our people actually are and hope, maybe people will just walk on over. No, we need to walk with our people in building what that new alternative looks like. And we'd be fools to think that, we can just talk the talk and hope that it's going to happen. We actually need to walk the walk, fight the real fight, because we are in a battle, as we've talked about. We're in a battle of ideas. We're in a constant cultural war, and we cannot and will not allow Trump and the far right to win in capturing the hearts and minds of our people. And so really, culture is a weapon, and we need to learn how to wield it.
All right.
That's right.